sometimes it's hard to know how to choose between all of the different products available for about the same price in the audio market. When you look at it, there are so many products that do exactly the same thing on paper, and so sometimes it can be tempting to choose the device that just looks the coolest. And whether it's in black, blue, or gold, the NiPO A100 makes a strong case for being one of the coolest looking portable DAC and headphone amps on the market. And then on paper, it backs those looks up with some impressive specs too. There's the ES9039Q2M DAC chip. That's the flagship portable DAC from ESS. There's the 550 milliwatts of power into a 32 ohm headphone, and the 9 hours of battery life if you're using that balanced output. Or if you're using the unbalanced output with the 3.5mm connection, you'll get a bit less power and a few more hours of battery life. On top of that, the sound quality from both outputs, the balanced and the unbalanced, is pretty similar, so you don't need to worry about losing out on sound quality if you go down the 3.5mm path. However, at $399 or $359 as I've sometimes seen it listed, the A100 from NiPO, I'm not sure, is not a cheap device. So you're going to want to know how it compares to the competition. In isolation, the sound of the A100 with IEMs or headphones is excellent. It produces an excellent tonal balance that I would describe as neutral, but not sterile in any way. It also provides very good detail and resolution, but with the sense of refinement that prevents it from ever getting harsh or forceful with its sound. The soundstage from the A100 is very wide, it's very well separated, but it doesn't provide a great deal of depth or layering. That said though, at this sort of price point, there's really not much on the market that is going to give you a lot of depth and layering. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the sense of imaging, focus, and separation of sounds is excellent at the price. And so it really comes down to the question of whether the sound from the A100, which is excellent in isolation, remains excellent in the context of some competition. And first up was the Dethonray Clarinet Pro. The Clarinet Pro costs about $50 more than the A100, and it's also larger and won't magnetically attach to the back of your smartphone, like the A100 will. Putting that aside though and thinking purely about sound quality, I compared the Clarinet Pro running its Rhapsody firmware with the sound of the A100. And I'll pin a video at the end about the Clarinet Pro to explain what I mean about the Rhapsody firmware, because the Clarinet Pro has some pretty cool features based around its firmware that nothing else seems to do the same way. And then switching between both devices, what I heard was the Clarinet Pro with that firmware installed delivers a slightly richer and fuller sound than the A100. That means that the Clarinet Pro is a bit warmer overall, but only by a very small amount, and it's largely because it places just a tiny bit more emphasis into the mid-range area. I can't stress enough that the Clarinet Pro is not a thick, lush, or overly rich sounding device, but it's not quite as neutral or clean sounding as the A100 is. The slightly richer sound from the Clarinet Pro means that it does have a slightly narrower overall sounding soundstage. Things feel a little bit more intimate from left to right. However, the Clarinet Pro does stretch things a tiny bit deeper. It's one of the few products that does have a sense of depth and layering at the price. It's not exceptional, but it's a bit more than the A100 does. And so overall, I would say that the Clarinet Pro does come across as sounding just a little tiny bit more spacious than the A100, but it's purely because it does go that little tiny bit deeper in the stage. In other words, it's not a big stretch between the two of them, and for those that like more width, you'll still prefer the A100, but the Clarinet Pro just felt overall like it had a slightly larger soundstage. On the flip side of that though, if soundstage isn't so important to you and you're more about detail and resolution, the A100 had the slight edge there. That could be due to the fact that the A100 does have a more neutral tuning by a small margin, and that might therefore be revealing a little bit more detail, or maybe it's just actually extracting a bit more detail. It's very hard to know. What's easy to know and what matters is that perceptually it sounds like it's extracting a bit more detail. So for the detail freaks and the resolution fans, the A100 is the better choice over the Clarinet Pro with the Rhapsody firmware. And again, watch the Clarinet Pro review at the end if you don't know about it already to understand what I mean about the firmware. And so at this point, the A100 had proved to me that it could go toe-to-toe with similar or maybe slightly more expensive devices. It's definitely a much more convenient device to carry around than the larger Clarinet Pro. It's slimmer, it's lighter, and it will magnetically attach to the back of a smartphone. But if you're going to go to a more compact device, maybe you want to go further into the world of compact devices. Maybe you also should be looking at the FiiO QX13 dongle. The QX13 is significantly cheaper than the A100 because it doesn't have a battery built in. That makes it smaller too. On the other hand, it also means the QX13 is not going to be as kind to the battery in your smartphone because it needs to draw the power from somewhere. Amazingly, despite not having a battery built in, the QX13 can actually deliver a little bit more power than the A100, but only by 50 milliwatts or so. And again, that power is going to come at the expense of your smartphone battery, depending on how loudly you're listening and how difficult your headphones or earphones are. The QX13 also offers EQ built in that you can use via the FiiO app, and it's also got balance control and a few other features like filters you can choose from and the ability to change the theme of the display on the device. So it's got some cool stuff going for it, whereas the A100 is more of a pure DAC and headphone amp. It's designed just to switch it on, choose a gain level, and the rest is all about the music. And then, when it came to the listening experience, I was pretty shocked that both of these devices sounded almost identical. To my ears, the QX13 sounded just a tiny bit smoother or more refined up top, while still delivering all the same levels of detail. On the other hand, the A100 sounded a little bit more textured. I would probably describe the QX13 as a slightly more refined sounding version of the A100, but realistically, they're as good as identical overall, and that's brilliant. I like that the A100 is simpler, and it's also slimmer if it's going on the back of your phone. Even though the QX13 is technically a smaller overall size device, it's a little bit thicker. It's got a bit of chunk to it. On the other hand though, with that slightly thicker design, you are getting some extra controls, the display, and an interesting interface overall. The QX13 is a more powerful device, both in terms of its versatility and controls, and also technically it can deliver a little bit more power to your headphones. And so I think ultimately, which of these products is best is going to come down to your choice over the aesthetics and the way you're going to use the device, how big or small you want it, whether you want it to have a built-in battery, whether you want something that can stick to the back of your smartphone with a magnet or not. And speaking of decisions like sticking to smartphones and the like, some of you might be wondering how the A100 compares to the Cartus T Pro, which is another one of those slim devices that can attach to the back of a phone. The Cartus T Pro has some few extra features over the A100 like Bluetooth, but at its much cheaper price, about $100 less, it's not quite on the same level of sonic performance. And so if you like the idea of a visually appealing and sonically striking sounding DAC and headphone amp that can attach magnetically to the back of a smartphone, I think the A100 is a really, really nice device. As always, I'll put some links in the description down below where you can pick one up if you're interested. And now if the Clarinet Pro and its firmware changes have caught your interest, or the tiny size and the immense power of the QX13 has caught your interest, I'll actually pin both videos here at the end so you can go and watch either or both of them next. But for now, until next time, peace, love and music, and I'll see you again soon.